everyone, Temporal here, and for this session we are covering a article that we see over here on CNBC. And it says just 50% of the college class of 2020 has traditional full-time jobs 6 months after graduation. So what we're looking at here is 6 months later. This is a study. It's been going on since 2014 of how many students are employed 6 months after graduation, or specifically full-time employed. So we're not including part-time work. We're not including 1099 work. We're not including, things like they've gone and started their own business. But how many of them are in the full-time job that is sort of the traditional path that people are used to thinking of it for financially making it through life. So let's get into it. These guys mostly stay on point, so I don't have to pull too many snippets. We can mostly just go. The college class of 2020 entered one of the most hostile labor markets in recent history. During the first year of the COVID pandemic, employment decreased across the country. By many measures, college graduation fared best during this period, but as time passes, research is capturing just how difficult conditions are for young workers. And this is going to be very similar to the Great Recession that happened in the 2008, etc. years, where we are looking at, hey, a lot of people recognized and fled into college, and then even maybe went from college to grad school because the employment market was still bad on the other end on the way out. So it's not weird to see that a lot of people are in college or going into college during this. That wouldn't be terribly weird when the economy goes sour. But what is not good is when, hey, there's not jobs on the other side, which apparently is the case here. But we need to see, and ultimately they're going to see that this data, while it tells us one of the most hostile, the data does not go back as far as the Great Recession, so it doesn't really give us a similar level event to compare to, unfortunately. The National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, recently analyzed the outcome of 563,000 bachelor degree graduates across 337 colleges and universities and found that only 50.2% of the class of 2020 had full-time jobs with a traditional employer, meaning they are not working as a freelancer or entrepreneur, within 6 months of graduation. So only half, 50.2%, 6 months after graduation for the class of 2020, bachelor's degrees, had jobs, had full-time jobs, the type of job where you can go, hey, this is a career. Now, nothing is really a career. I hope my viewers know that, but can think of it as, oh, hey, this is something that they, in the traditional sense go, yes, I get that. I go to this can take 40 plus hours a week. I can get benefits out of this. If I just save my money from this, maybe I'll be okay. That only half of 2020 graduates 6 months after they've been out. And the longer you're out without a real job, in a lot of ways, the harder it gets to find that first real job. So that's not a good sign. But we do get a comparison. In comparison, 50.3% of the class of 2019 graduates were employed within the same time frame. So that gives us a little bit of pre-pandemic data. It's not perfect in terms of pre-pandemic data because there was still some in that 6 month period for the graduation class of 2019 of, oh wait, the pandemic started. And when you go 6 months into 2020, like, you're in the pandemic. So that's not perfect, but it does tell us in a more normal year that it's 55, so 5% more, depending on how you do math, quite a bit more than that. But instead of 50% having jobs, 55.3% jobs had more, so 5.1% more there. That is significant, but still not great. You're looking at college graduates, full-time jobs 6 months after. Even in the sort of pre-pandemic, not fully pre-pandemic, we were looking at a little more than half have a full-time job 6 months later. So that really tells you something, that you guys need to be intentional in what you're doing. If you're going this college route, you've got to be intentional in what you're doing, because you're potentially taking on debt, you're spending productive years of your life, you're spending time that you could be making money, you're spending time that you could be doing other opportunity costs, like having fun, like doing whatever, and going, hey, I'm going to go do this for a 55% chance of having a job. Now, obviously, people are individual people, and this is a big number, not a, oh, you specifically have a 55% chance. You can significantly boost your rate of employment by networking well, by being in majors that are more in demand, but actually more in demand. Don't believe propaganda about what's in demand. You actually have to go do the research yourself. You actually have to go look and see, okay, what is this profession actually making? What are newbies in this profession actually making? How much demand is there actually? Don't believe articles necessarily from places like this, because those do sort of get out there as propaganda. You're much better off if you look at, hey, what can you actually find? Can you actually dig through and get information that's been really had those numbers run and isn't, oh, yes, we're short on pharmacists. And no, you're not short on pharmacists. You're pushing that you're short on pharmacists. You're reporting to media like CNBC here that you're short on pharmacists to get more interest in pharmacy so that you have more pharmacies, so that there's greater supply and therefore you can pay less, that sort of thing. So, like, be careful when you're looking around you. But you can drive this number up, definitely. Students who attended college with fewer than 2,000 students tended to do better after graduation. Closer to 62% of these students had full-time positions after 6 months. So it wasn't actually 62%. It was probably something like 61.7 or something. Who knows? But we can see there, that's a big jump. We're going from, and this is the 2000 data as far as I can, or the 2020 data, not the 2019, and this was 62%, and this is for 2,000 students, schools with 2,000 students or fewer. So this tells us a few things. What we're looking at is what we're looking at with this time for what we're looking at with this size is, hey, if you are talking about 2,000 students, you are talking about a small school, and you can't help but be doing networking in a small school like that. You will know a lot of the other students at a 2,000 person school. Like, you can't help but know a lot of other people. You are going to network better, and networking is one of the best ways to get a job. It's perhaps unfortunate, but it is one of the best ways to get a job. Who knows what you know is in a lot of ways more important than just merit. So that would be a big influencer there. And then the other big influencer there is, if you're talking about universities of 2,000 school students or less, you are talking about private schools. And if you can afford to go to a small private school with 2,000 or less students, usually what that means is your family is already pretty well networked. And if your family is already pretty well networked, you're probably going to be in a situation where, hey, you can more easily find that next job, be it through nepotism directly, like, oh, you're going to go work for a family member, or, oh, hey, yes, I'll hire you because you're already in our class effectively, and therefore I will hire your son or daughter, and, maybe then your friend will hire my son or daughter, whatever. And it's not always quite that specific of you hire them and then tit for tat you hire them, but they already see them, they're already in that network if you can afford to go to these 2,000 student schools. So again, it's not just like, oh, being a smaller school is strictly better, though networking probably is. I expect some of this also has to do with you're going to a small private school, and that means you already, whether you realize it or not, have a bit of a network going on there, have a bit of a trajectory going on there in your life. Okay. Because that is a big jump, going from 50.2% to 62%. That's huge. The COVID-19 pandemic had a significant effect on the job market for the class of 2020, and our report illustrates that, says Sean Van Driezel, Executive Director of NACE. In terms of employment, within 6 months of graduation, 2020 graduates had the worst outcome since we began tracking within 2014. So again, we don't really have a similar economic event to compare this to, because we haven't had a big dip between 2014 and now, except for the one that we had here in, 2020, 2021. Like, this is a big one. The last similar big one would be, you know, Great Recession, housing crashes, that sort of thing. We could, before that, go back to dot-com bust. Like, we could go to some things, but we don't have the data for that from these guys. So that makes this sort of limited in terms of, okay, how much of this is this, how does this really compare? Is this the worst ever? Is this by a little bit the worst ever? Is this not the worst ever? What are we looking at? Fortunately, they're going to give us a little bit of a comparison to get that. According to an analysis of Bureau of Labor Statistics data from January 2020 to October 2020 by Pew Research Center, 2020 college graduations saw a bigger decrease in labor force participation than those who graduated during the Great Recession. So that doesn't tell us numbers yet, but let's keep going. They're telling us that according to Pew, which is a pretty credible research there when it comes to that, hey, it's bigger than it was in terms of the drop in labor force participation than it was during the Great Recession. That kind of makes sense, though. I mean, we're seeing less ability to work in some ways, less job that works, more fear of working than potentially we had back during the Great Recession. People wanted to work in a lot of ways during the Great Recession. People want to work now in some ways, but there is some fear of going back to the workplace that some people would have had. I'm not saying that's a huge impact, though it is an impact. So that's not terribly surprising. Pew estimates that among Americans aged 16 and older, the employment rate declined from 61% in October 2019 to 58% in 2020. Okay, so that's useful information. We're seeing a 3% drop there. That's significant. That might confuse people because they might know what the unemployment rate is, and they might go, wait, shouldn't employment rate and unemployment rate, if you have an unemployment rate that's in the fours, shouldn't your employment rate, by definition, be something like 96? And no, it's not, because you get into employment participation. And this is why some people object to the unemployment rate as a number, quite reasonably in some ways, because, hey, more people might want to participate if conditions were better. If pay was better, more people would be participating. If they could have found jobs, they wouldn't have chosen to early retire. If they could find jobs, they wouldn't have gone on to grad school. They would have instead joined the labor market. So that's one reason that some people object to using unemployment numbers. But the employment rate, and so, the difference, of course, between your 58% or your 4% or your 5% is going to be people who aren't going to be working and aren't expected to be working. Either they've come off unemployment rolls, so it's been decided bureaucratically that they're not looking anymore, or hey, they're in school, they're doing other things that cause them to go, oh, well, you're not supposed to be working, which again doesn't really hold up because you have a lot of students working and things like that. Okay. And according to an analysis of U.S. Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and National Center for Education Statistics data for the years 1980 to 2019 by Georgetown University researchers, college costs have increased by 169% over the past 4 decades. And if we're clear, most of that happened basically around the Great Recession. Like, yes, they've gone up. They've gone up significantly. A huge amount of that spike, they've been going up effectively like this, but we went, instead of them going up like this, it was, hey, they're going up like this, Great Recession, they really spiked hard, and then they continued their trend like this. So that's a big deal. We have not seen college costs going up very fast right now during this. A lot of companies have been like, okay, we're going to be meek and we're going to be quiet. We are not going to be willing to raise prices. Some absolutely have, and you've seen record profits in some industries. To my knowledge, that has not hugely been the education industry that has gone, hey, we're really hiking up our prices during this pandemic. Though you've certainly seen other industries do it, and to some degree, people have to do it, and things follow. I'm sure you're now seeing some of it as, okay, people delayed for a bit, but eventually they go, everything's getting more expensive, inflation, so they're going to charge more. Speaking of which, I will be charging more in the new year for my coaching rates because, yes, inflation happened. That's how that works. Okay. So yeah, we have seen that increase. We have seen quite a bit of an increase there. While earnings for workers between the ages of 22 and 27 have increased by just 19%. That sounds about right. Okay. To make matters worse, college graduates today also owe more in student debt. Adjusted for inflation, 2008 college graduates owned $24,012 in student loans on average. In 2020, that total was closer to $36,665. And that's actually like a little lower than I would have expected. Average is a funny number to play with, obviously. Okay, average is good, but how much is average being pulled up by people who just took out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars? Not hundreds and hundreds, but hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt? versus people, like that can move averages quite a bit, even if most people are only at 10K in debt, for example. Like this can move the average a lot, but it's really hard to know. So I'd have maybe like to see median here instead. I'd have probably like to see mean and median, but that's okay. This could be worse. Like honestly, that's a fair amount of time, 2008 to 2020. Costs have gone up quite a bit in that time. I would have expected this number to go up more. And yes, I know they're saying adjusting for inflation, but nothing actually adjusts for inflation correctly because you can't adjust for inflation correctly. Like adjusting for inflation truly correctly it doesn't really work because most people are looking at, okay, the consumer price index to do their inflation adjustment, and that's not real. Different things inflate at different rates than other things. Anyway, that's life. Okay. Beyond a difficult labor market, the NACE report also mentions that graduate school attendance may be another reason the class of 2020's employment rate dipped. Just over 21% of 2020 grads pursued continuing education after receiving their bachelor's degree, an increase from 18.6% in 2019. So we see again about a 3.5% increase, 18.5 to 21% in terms of how many grads pursue continuing education there. And that's not unusual when it's a bad economy. People sort of go, can I hide from this bad economy? Can I hide from this bad economy in the education section and then on the other side be able to earn my way out of it? It's not the best plan. I understand why people do it. It makes sense in some ways. You really have to look at is that continuing education going to meaningfully bump your anticipated salary? Have you actually gone and done the calculations of how much is that going to increase and are those jobs really available? You're not looking at what the top lawyers are making. You're not looking about what someone told you who graduated 30 years ago of, oh, I made plenty of money when you're looking at what the average lawyer is making now if you're going on to law school. You're looking at what are you going to make right on the other side of med school if you go to a no-name med school, that sort of thing, when you're looking at these. And those would be some of the better options for things to do in continuing education there. So people definitely do want to have some thought in where they go from there. And chat, don't worry, I will catch up with you in just a bit. Okay. Uh-huh. This isn't really beyond a difficult labor market, though. This is still a result of a difficult labor market. Like, the reason that you have more people going into continuing education is mostly because of a difficult labor market. Like, it is mostly that. There's other aspects that have gone in there of, oh, there's the prestige of it, and maybe that prestige of an advanced degree has become more desirable over time. But most of this driver is, hey, it's a bad employment market, or hey, I can't get that six-figure job I want with a bachelor's degree. I need a more advanced degree, that sort of thing. Okay. The report also notes that for college graduates who did manage to secure full-time traditional employment, wages increased. But the average starting salary for the class of 2020 was $56,576, 3.8% greater than in 2019. In addition, the median salary rose to $54,686, 3.7% greater than in 2019. I'll let it keep going here. A key driver for the increase in the average starting salary was the lack of low-paying jobs that many new graduates typically secure as their first assignment following graduation. So, average wages went up because less people were employed, and some of the people who weren't employed would have been at the bottom end. So this isn't really a better situation for the world, for the country, however you want to think about it. Now, this isn't the only reason. There is some ability of labor did a little bit of a, no, we're going to work for more. This happened much more in blue-collar jobs and service sector jobs than it did in white-collar jobs, the type of stuff that you're usually talking about college degree people wanting to go into for their full-time employment. But a little bit of that did happen there, especially some of that happened in terms of labor power surrounding, no, we're doing work from home, suck it up, it's happening, deal with it, business is. But yeah, what we're seeing here is there's an increase, and it's an increase of about, hey, 3.7, 3.8%, but a lot of that, or a portion of that, is coming from there just weren't as many low-end jobs to get, so less total people are employed, which isn't great, isn't great. Okay. As was the case with the increase for the class of 2019, the salary increase for 2020 exceeds inflation. The real increase in starting salary controlling for inflation was 2.5%. You can't really control for inflation, but I understand what they're doing. Hopefully you understand what they're doing. It's a number and it's a number that you should understand, but no one is truly controlling for inflation. That's very hard to do. We'd never all agree on how to do that. Many of the retail, hospitality, and other service focused jobs simply weren't there, and these tend to be low paying, explained Van Drizzle. As a result, most of the salaries that were reported were the higher paying jobs, which skewed the average. So that skewed the average, and that's not good from a data point standpoint, and it's also not good for a standpoint of those people who went to college but then went, oh shoot, I'm not going to be able to use my degree, but maybe I can still make decent money waiting tables, or maybe I can still make decent money as a floor manager on a casino or something like that. Having less of those jobs, having not as many of those jobs isn't particularly good, because those are some of the sort of first level safety net type jobs that people who went and tried to get degrees and then don't end up using their degree might have fallen and caught and been able to live okay lives off of. Like, this is the salary and the life path that they expected to take, but they're able to catch here, and that's still an okay one, and not having those isn't particularly good. So we look at this, and this isn't particularly good, guys. I mean, this is a trend that has been continuing direction wise for a while. Individually, you can and should find your way through it. If you're going to college, that's not necessarily a mistake. You can go to college. There are reasons to go to college. If the profession that you're going to be in is like, hey, college degree here is actually useful, it actually makes sense. Like, okay, you want to be a lawyer? Yes, you're going to have to go through college. You want to be in medicine, be that nursing, be that doctor, be that whatever? Yes, you're going to have to be there. You want to do some accounting? Yep, some college makes sense. You want to do computer science? Little more hit and miss. There's other paths into computer science that absolutely work, but you really have to do your due diligence on researching. Hey, you don't want to just go to some coder boot camp that has a terrible placement rate too. A lot of coder boot camps have placement rates that are going to look like 50% 6 months later, and you'll pay thousands of dollars to do them. That is in some ways, I suppose, a better deal in the sense of, hey, you didn't spend as much of your life, your opportunity cost to go do this wasn't quite as high, but it's also worth nothing to you if you change your career path later and, oh, well, you're not really doing computer stuff anymore, the way that the degree has at least a little bit more prestige help to it, that sort of thing. Um, so you've got your decisions to make there. But I definitely do recommend that people be, very intentional about what they're doing with their lives. I know that's a tough thing to say to 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds. Like, I get that that's a tough thing, but be intentional about what you're doing, guys. You can see that it does make a difference. You can be in the 62% rather than the 50%. And no, that does not mean that you should take out infinite student loans to go to the small private school. Though it does, as we can see from this data, strongly suggest to you that if you do end up going to university of either type, and you aren't going into this, yes, I have a super, super employable skill, that networking should be a focus. Networking does a lot to get jobs, and that's really what this number is telling us, that there's two different types of networking that make it up here. So yeah, that's basically what this says. Like I said, my advice, I can answer more questions, I can go into more specific advice, would be very intentional in what you're doing. Run towards the jobs that most people don't want to do. Run towards the majors that most people aren't majoring in because they're not fun. Um, that would be the advice. But also question, hey, does it make sense to take this much time off, this much time out of your life to go through the university path if what you're doing is something that you could put together and do yourself, like especially if you plan on working for yourself. Again, this isn't great news because it's a lot easier to work for yourself after you've been in the working world for a bit and you've worked for someone else and you've gotten some experience, but people are going to have to do what they're going to have to do. Okay, let's catch up on chat. Zergling Dance says, I do think 6 months is a bit of a short time frame, especially since they were only looking at full-time jobs. There can be a few of stepping stones in the first year. So I hear what you're saying. I'll let you keep reading. Also, if you wanted to get into a grad program, sometimes you were too busy in your final year to apply, so you go for the next intake. Sure, sure. I think that's fair, Zergling Dance, where there is going to be some portion of people that are working part time jobs because they know they're going to grad school next year. So they're like in a very temporary place of, hey, I know I'm going into grad school next year. But again, some of that is also in this our increased grad school desire, increased grad school attendance has a lot to do with it's a bad economic playing field out there. I don't want to go out to the real world. I sort of want to hide in the school world. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's sort of like, hey, I'm going to go over here where it's sort of its own bubble that's different than the rest of the world out there until the financial world gets out there better and there's better jobs, that sort of thing. So, like, it's still sort of driving into it. As for the first part of, I do think 6 months is a bit of a short time frame, I don't know that I agree. Like, the reality is, most people are not going to university in this day and age because they want to be well-rounded good citizens that understand their place in society and what it takes to be a good citizen. And people aren't going to university for that. People are going to university because they've been told that that's how they go get jobs, or because, they've been told that by their parents, they've been told that by their K-12, they've been told that by society at large. You've seen some pushback against that, some waking up to that's not necessarily a direct pipeline of, hey, college to job and the job's just waiting at the other end. And I hope people are seeing that with like, hey, 50.2%, 55.3% of it's not necessarily there. You have to make sure you're securing that job. Maybe that means through you're doing your paid internships. Maybe that means you're doing everything you can be to network. But you really want to, even as you're finishing up school, even as you're in your senior year there, make sure you know where your job is going to be. And there are schools that do a much better job of that than others. But yeah, 6 months is like, I think Zergling Dance. I think you might be looking at that like, hey, it's normal. Lots of your friends, or maybe you, it took 6 months to find a job, and I could see how like that sort of become true. That yeah, people are frequently 6 months out. Half of people are now 6 months out, not in jobs. So maybe that's not a great time to look at it. But no, that is a decrease. That is a decrease of 5% from the year before. And if we kept going back further in time, this number is trending down very much. I don't have that data, but I'm almost certain that this number is trending down because no, it did used to be easier to find full-time employment. A, it used to be easier to find full-time employment, period. But B, it used to be easier to find full-time employment out of college as that degree was a hotter commodity. It's sort of become this isn't really a differentiator anymore. This is just required. This is just sort of what you start life with. Instead of starting life with, okay, well, now you're saddled by the mortgage payment to your house. No, now you're saddled with you had to spend 4 years of your life to get a degree, and maybe you had to go through student debt to get it. That said, I know you are in Australia. Things are a little different for you. Gator says, I think these small schools are also more specialized. Yeah, they can frequently be more specialized. It depends what these are. So, students who attended colleges with fewer than 2,000 students tended to do better after graduation. I assume that we are still talking about colleges and universities here, and we're not talking about more specialized trade school type things, which we could be. And if we're doing that, yeah, a lot of stuff will have them working in apprenticeship type levels immediately, and they'll be making money immediately. That said, you still have to be careful because you can also find a lot of for-profit schools, small schools like this that are selling you a dream of, oh, you're going to be an animator, you're going to be a rigger, you're going to be a coder, and it's like, well, no, a lot of people want to do these things, and there's not actually that much demand for them. Okay. Gator says, yeah, that too, Zerg. A lot of people don't find full time for their field directly after college. That's true now. About half of them. But guys, that's like a decrease. Like the point is that is decreasing. The point is our number here is going down. That used to be less true. It used to be more true that you could pretty quickly find that job, and the situation has just been getting worse. So like it might be interesting to see how the numbers a year out get, but once you get past 6 months, a year, it's kind of just gets less likely that you'll be using your degree in your job field, and it also gets less likely that you're going to pivot into a better career path than the one you're currently on, be that waiting tables or doing repairs at a Best Buy or whatever the case there. Like it gets less likely that people's career paths will significantly increase as they get stuck in those ruts for longer period of times. As we know, HR departments look at it and it's like, oh, you graduated? That's fine. Oh, you haven't been doing anything for a year? That's bad. Or, oh, you've been working at Best Buy for a year? That's bad, and that gets you sorted either by HR people or by programs into things that make it harder to adjust your path into the white collar job that you might want and have expected you were going to be able to get post college. So no, I don't think 6 months is bad, though I think it could be interesting to also look at the data a year out and 2 years out and see how does the data compare a year out now to a year out 3 years ago to a year out in 2019. Blah says there's just not a lot of openings for people graduating and trying to become pro Overwatch coaches. Right, Blah? Right? No. I'm not actually worried about that. Zergling Dan says, I don't mean grad school, like a grad program in a company where you rotate around the business, etc., and get development opportunities. Less of a thing here. There are specific schools that can get you places, things like that. There's specific internships that look like that. We don't have a ton of things that look like that in the US, and in portions of Europe really don't like that either. It really depends what country you're looking at, but there's countries like France that are just like absolutely not when it comes to things like internships. America has a mixed history with internships. We've gotten tougher on internships in recent years and said, hey, no, you have to flat out pay interns. And that's discouraged the existence of internships when before we had situations of, well, you have to pay interns or they have to do things that are completely not productive to the company that a paid employee simply would not do, which has decreased the number of internships available, probably a good thing, but also has caused the ones that do exist to be paid, which is fine. Paid internship is paid work. Paid work is paid work. That said, a lot of the times when an internship exists, you could also get the junior job. They'd treat you exactly the same way, but you'd make quite a bit more money. But hey, other places are worse. I mean, you can then get to parts of UK where you're paying companies money for opportunities to intern for them, which is just wild. But hey, okay. Zergling Dan says 6 months is super short time frame. I would be more interested in 1 year status for full-time work. Like, I get that, Zergling Dance, but I'm telling you that didn't used to be the case. Like, this has gotten worse over time where you now feel like that, but you now feel like that because you exist in this world now and you're not really looking back in time and saying, oh, well, yeah, no, it used to be, these numbers used to be a fair bit higher. You've acclimated to, oh, only about half of people have jobs, full-time jobs, half a year after they've been out of university. And again, the longer you're out of university and not working professional jobs, the more you're dead to HR departments in terms of your ability to get into jobs without very strong networking. Yeah, it's a decrease. I did make that comment initially, and the decrease is quite significant. Bystander Overwatch says, this doesn't sound good for me, lol. I thought college would be better than just getting a random job. If you know what you want to do, if you're going to college and you know what you want to do on the other side of college, and what you want to do on the other side of college requires a degree, absolutely. That's fine. But make sure you understand what the employment prospects actually look like on the other side for the thing that you want to get into, and what average pay actually looks like. Like, don't go look at one source for this stuff. Go get it. Go check out. You can even go check out, like, what are people saying? Are there trade board forums for these things? Are there Reddits that are talking about it? And don't look at just, what one person says. Get quite a bit of information on these things. Some of your best information can actually come from what insurance agencies do, the people that they hire. Like, some of them will give you the best information on this sort of thing for, okay, what is the actual expected payout type thing. But hey, what are you going to do? Okay. Zergling says, however, in your first year, if you didn't ensure you had employment right after you finished, you might go for a student contract and then extend that until you can get a proper grad position. Do you count that? No, but we mostly don't have that, Zergling Dance. We mostly don't have that in the US, and this is almost certainly looking at US that we're talking about here. Yeah. National Association of College and Employers. So, yeah, national. We don't really have that set up here, Zergling Dance. You're going to coach Overwatch. Wait, what? Of course it's paid? Who would work for free? I mean, that used to be a thing. That very much used to be a thing. When I was in college, it was required within our major that everyone who was a part of our major go through an internship in criminal justice. And I went through one, and a lot of people could not find paid internships, but it was required that you went and found an internship. And that was pretty common. So at that point, you're paying the university for the credits for the units so you can go work for someone else for free. That's a scam, don't get me wrong, but that was pretty commonplace in America during the Great Recession. Some people were getting paid internships, a lot of people were not. The courts have gotten more ferocious about that and said, we don't like that. We look at that as slavery and we're not cool with it. But that's been a thing in the recent past in America. And again, UK is worse. Grad programs have the standard starting salary range. Just be a mass communication major. None of them have any idea what they want to be when they grow up. Don't do that. Don't do that. I know Blah's saying that tongue in cheek, but do not go for this. Oh, you just need a degree. Get a degree in business. Get a degree in communications. Do not do that stuff. You just need a degree. That era is gone. It was basically the boomers got to do that. Little bit of Gen X got to do that. And that was when you were looking at, what percentage of the population has a degree? 20, low 20s, like 23%. High teens, like 18%. Yes, when this percentage of the US population has degrees, just having a degree lets you, sort of be pre-qualified for lots of jobs. This is not the case anymore because we sold the idea to everybody that degrees are the way up and you have to get a degree. And that means you're not looking at these percentages of people having degrees anymore. You're looking at many more, and that makes them not very good differentiators. And you might say, okay, well, you still need to get them because if you don't, you're differentiated in a bad way, but you're actually seeing companies pull away from that. You're seeing more in the software world, for example, that you can go, no, if you can pass coding tests, you can do okay. You're seeing more of a, no, if you figure out that you want to start your own business and you know how to do it, you're fine. No, there's other routes that don't require a college degree. You can make pretty good money working in a casino, the right job. You can make pretty good money working as a real estate agent. You can make pretty good money working in other sales type things. If you can sell, people do not care if you have a degree or not. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, US, too different. I hear you. Was required at my degree to have work experience too, but like it has to be paid. Yeah. Okay, less than the standard rate, but still paid. I hear you. I hear you. Okay, I'll give you guys another chance to get in here with chat, but I think we've covered what we needed to. We can see that, hey, there's a decrease here. It's a COVID decrease. Probably makes sense that it's greater than the Great Recession because we're looking at this, and again, some people are a little more not willing to work in the era of, well, there's germs out there, and there's also a greater degree of disillusionment in the system as a whole than there was in the Great Recession. When it's a black swan event that happens once in a lifetime, it's one thing that the things that people want to be able to afford, like houses, get further away from them. When it happens every 10 years or so, that people get, 10 years further away from a house because costs go up, you're going to see more people checking out of the system and laying flat effectively. But yeah, that's what we've got. If you guys have questions, you can throw them up here. If you guys have comments, think I'm all wrong, think the outlook is too bleak, or say, no, 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 any degree is still worthwhile, temporal, you're wrong, just get any degree, it's great, feel free to leave them in comments down below, and, I'll roll my eyes. But that's okay. I am perfectly happy with people telling me that I am wrong. But for those of you that, want to do well, make sure you have your plan, make sure you've done your research, and that you haven't just trusted one or two people to tell you, even people who mean well for you, like your parents, like a teacher that watched out for you, even people that mean well for you. The world doesn't work now the way it worked back when they were going through life. You have to do your own research, and you have to do it in multiple places to figure out how much do you actually expect to make in what areas, and not just, oh, I saw one job posting. You really do have to do those things. Okay. Zergling Dan says the key is whatever degree you do, you need to have intention behind it. You're very correct on that point. Without intention, there's probably going to be a bad time. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, that's going to do it for now. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like, consider subscribing if you haven't done so, and I will see you guys in the next one.